right now, if you look at the map of global trade, it's being redrawn in real time. I mean, we're seeing everything from incredible disaster recovery efforts to persistent security threats and even massive new investments that are changing the game. The world's supply chains, they are being tested like never before. So let's dive right in.
Okay, so let me start by asking you this. What in the world does a bridge collapsing in Baltimore have to do with a drone attack in the Red Sea? I know, on the surface, they sound like two totally separate, random events, right? But they're not.
Well, the answer is that they are both pushing our global supply chain to its absolute limits. Each one of these events, in its own unique way, is exposing the vulnerabilities, but also, and this is important, the incredible responses of that massive network that moves everything around our planet.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at a really remarkable story of recovery in Baltimore. Then, we're going to shift gears to the ongoing risks in a key waterway. After that, we'll explore how new trade corridors are literally being built right now, what all of this means for the market, and finally, what the real advantage is in this very complex new world.
Okay, let's kick things off with a story of incredible resilience. And honestly, it's some genuinely good news. We are talking about the Port of Baltimore and its truly remarkable comeback.
So just think about this timeline for a second. Back in March, the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge completely blocked the main channel, a total disaster. But then, in just about 3 months of non-stop intensive work, the channel was fully restored. I mean, that is a huge, huge victory for the entire U.S. East Coast supply chain.
Now, to really get why this was so critical, you have to understand the kind of cargo Baltimore is famous for. It's called ro-ro cargo. That's short for roll on, roll off. And it's basically anything with wheels. We're talking cars, trucks, big farm tractors, you name it. Baltimore is a massive hub for the auto industry, so you can imagine that getting this specific channel open again was an absolute top priority. And this reopening, wow, it sends major ripple effects across the whole system. With the port back online, those vital auto and ro-ro cargo routes are getting back to normal. And that takes immense pressure off other East Coast ports, which, you guessed it, should lead to less congestion. It could even help stabilize all those trucking and rail costs we've been seeing.
All right, now let's shift gears. From a story of resilience after an accident, we're turning to another part of the world that's dealing with a persistent, ongoing, man-made threat, and that's happening in the Red Sea. And look, this is not some theoretical risk we're talking about. This is happening right now, as we speak. Houthi militant attacks are continuing. Just recently, a commercial ship, the MV Verbena, was hit by missiles. The crew was actually forced to abandon ship. You've got U.S. naval forces in constant defensive operations, but the threat, it remains incredibly high.
So what does this actually mean for shipping companies? Well, they're left with a really tough choice. The usual route through the Suez Canal, it's shorter, it's cheaper, but it's also a high-risk conflict zone. The other option is to divert all the way around Africa, but that adds a ton of time and money for fuel and insurance, not to mention dealing with other things like rough weather.
So how on earth are companies navigating this chaos? Well, it all comes down to intelligence. Real-time data from platforms like AIS, that's the automatic identification system that tracks ships, is being combined with threat intelligence. This allows vessels to literally perform evasive maneuvers. As the quote here says, in these kinds of conflict zones, technology and data, they're not just for efficiency anymore, they're absolutely critical for survival.
You know, this constant instability is forcing a major rethink. In a world full of these unpredictable choke points like the Red Sea, some major players aren't just reacting anymore. They're getting proactive. They're building entirely new trade corridors from scratch. And a perfect example of this is the UAE's massive strategic investment in India. This is a move with some really big geopolitical implications.
Let's just start with a number, to put this in perspective. $400 million. That's the scale of the investment we're talking about. And a number like that, it's a clear signal of some very serious strategic intent. So where's all that money going? A company called DP World, they're a global port operator based in the UAE, is pumping it into a brand new logistics hub and a free trade zone in India. The whole point of this move is to create a seamless trade corridor directly between India and the UAE, basically bypassing some of those riskier, more traditional routes.
And this isn't just a one-off deal. It's actually part of a very clear playbook they're running. Step 1. Invest in critical port infrastructure overseas. Step 2. Integrate it all with digital platforms to make it super efficient. And the end goal?
to position themselves as the essential gateway between a massive market like the Indian subcontinent and the rest of the world.
Okay, so we've looked at recovery, we've looked at risk, and we've looked at strategic investment. So now, let's try to decode the signals. What is the market actually telling us through all of these different events?
Let's just break down the implications here. Baltimore's reopening, that signals easing congestion and hopefully more stable costs on the U.S. East Coast. The persistent conflict in the Red Sea, that means insurance and voyage costs are going to stay high and volatile. Meanwhile, you have new sanctions on the so-called shadow fleet. That's the term for tankers used to move oil from sanctioned countries. Tighter enforcement there could actually reduce the supply of illegal tankers and support legitimate freight rates. And finally, the UAE's expansion, that's a crystal clear strategic push to dominate that India to global market corridor.
This brings us to our final and maybe most important point. When you step back and look at all these forces at play, what is the one thing that gives you the ultimate advantage in today's world of global trade?
The big takeaway is this. From the rapid disaster recovery in Baltimore to navigating active conflict zones, the message is crystal clear. It's not just about having the biggest ships or the busiest ports anymore. The ultimate advantage now is supply chain intelligence. It's the ability to use real-time data to see disruptions coming, to reroute your assets, and to seize new opportunities before anyone else even knows what's happening.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. As these trade routes continue to shift and new risks keep popping up, we have to ask ourselves which of the global connections we all rely on will prove to be strong enough and which ones are going to break under the pressure. The answer to that, well, that's going to define the future of global trade.